All right, the Second Crusade, apparently. So the First Crusade was like via Alexios, the Normans, the Latins, and they took the Levant. Now the Second Crusade, I don't know anything about either. Let's jump in. This is called Ager Sanguinis, 1119. Crusaders Field of Blood.
It is June 28th, 1119 in eastern Syria. On that dry summer morning, as the Latin soldiers are waking up in their camp, they are confronted by a terrifying sight.
Seljuks.
The Antiochene camp is almost completely surrounded by the Muslim army, led by their formidable warlord Ilghazi. Without further ado, their Christian leader, Roger of Salerno, attempts to lead his forces outside of the camp. However, as the Frankish hosts prepare to stand their ground, they are faced with over 40,000 Seljuk warriors already advancing towards their positions. Nevertheless, the Holy Cross of Antioch encourages the Latins to confront their opponents in the upcoming struggle. The following morning would see a spectacular clash that would not only determine the fate of the city of Antioch, but would also change the course of the history of the Crusader states. The Battle of Ager Sanguinis was about to begin. This video was sponsored by our kind YouTube now provides a lot of the or so series of Russian server will now keep the majority of our work. With the death of King Baldwin I of Jerusalem in 1118, the Latin knights and barons present in the Holy City had,
Of course, Baldwin died in the Fatimid Empire, Fatimid dynasty, down in Egypt.
to choose his successor. Baldwin didn't have a natural-born heir, so in theory his eldest brother, Eustace, seemed to be his most logical successor. However, Eustace was far away in Europe, and preferred to rule his safer family holdings in Bouillon rather than risk it all in the Holy Land.
Same.
Only after he came under pressure from his courtiers, shaming him for not fulfilling his family duties, did he finally decide to move east to inherit all Baldwin had fought so hard for. Meanwhile, Jerusalem was in more immediate need than ever for a strong and decisive leader. The Grand Vizier of the Fatimid Caliphate, Al-Afdal, wanted to punish the Latins for the latest invasion of Egypt, and saw Jerusalem's interregnum as an opportunity to do just that. To that end, Al-Afdal made an alliance with Baldwin's mortal enemy, Tughtekin, Emir of Damascus. The
They're gonna squeeze it.
Fatimid army gathered in Ashdod and invited the Burid warlord to join their forces against the Latins. Tughtekin was eager to undermine any Frankish influence in the Levant, and quickly sent a delegation to Jerusalem, demanding all Frankish possessions beyond Jordan. Everyone in the royal council in Jerusalem was keenly aware the odds were not in their favour, and fell into hopelessness. Everyone except for Jocelyn of Courtenay. Confidently, he proposed that Baldwin le Boar, Count of Edessa, be elected the next king of Jerusalem.
Not a bad choice.
For many nobles, this idea seemed quite reasonable. Baldwin le Boar was the eldest surviving leader of the First Crusade, which made him an experienced warrior and a cunning diplomat. Jocelyn also hoped that as a reward for putting Baldwin of Edessa on the throne of Jerusalem, he would be given a county of Edessa. Having the support of Jerusalem's patriarch, Arnulf, Baldwin of Edessa was summoned to Jerusalem, and on the 14th of April 1118 was crowned as Baldwin II.
Okay.
Shortly after this, Jocelyn received his desired county upon swearing an oath of loyalty for Baldwin.
Makes sense.
Other lords like Roger of Salerno and Pons of Tripoli followed suit, and recognized themselves as Baldwin II's vassals. Consequently,
So Jerusalem, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, is the power in the region.
the Kingdom of Jerusalem formally became the most powerful Crusader state in the Levant.
Yeah.
Back in Europe, as soon as Eustace heard the news in Apulia, he returned back to his European domains, sparing Jerusalem from a potential succession crisis.
He just found a reason to go back.
Just like his predecessor, Baldwin le Boar did not sit idly by as his enemies gathered around his realm. Refusing Tughtekin's impossible demands, he rallied his forces, and together with his newly acquired vassals, he intended to confront the threat from Cairo and Damascus all at the same time.
Well, he's got a good friendship group right here with Jocelyn, Pons, and Roger.
In the west, en route to Jaffa, Fatimid and Frankish armies rushed for engagement, but realizing that neither of them had the advantage of surprise, Both armies ended up trapped in a stalemate for several months until both of them decided to retreat. Through his hasty actions, it wouldn't be the last time Baldwin II would save Jerusalem.
And by the way, Jerusalem's been under attack like 20 times in the last 15 years.
Meanwhile, to the northeast of Jordan, Jocelyn of Courtenay had delayed his departure to Edessa by fighting the forces of Damascus, dealing with ongoing raids in Galilee orchestrated by Toghtekin's son, Buri. When his forces finally rejoined with Baldwin II, he decided to intercept the Damascene army at Dara, near the same battlefield where, in 535 AD, the great Byzantine general Belisarius won a crushing victory against the Persian Empire.
We did that video. Epic history. That was a good video. I'm sure Kings and Generals did a version of that too. We'll have to get to.
In the engagement that followed, the Franks provoked the young and inexperienced Buri to rush forward, luring him straight into an ambush and defeating his Damascene host entirely. Another threat on the horizon was the local Bedouin tribes, who used the power vacuum.
There's still Bedouin tribes all throughout this area? I mean, I'm sure there are, but wow.
In the Transjordan to settle into the region and raid trade caravans near the Yarmouk River. Jocelyn made an attempt at a daring night attack on one of the Bedouin camps, with the aid of Galilean barons Godfrey and William of Bur. Numbering around 150 horsemen, the Crusaders divided their force into 3 squadrons, each commanded by its leader. Though the plan looked promising at the start, its execution went terribly wrong for the Franks. Jocelyn's group got lost and stuck between the sandhills, while the Bedouins, already aware of the Latin presence, surrounded the Bur brothers and routed them. Godfrey was killed during the fighting, and around 100 knights were taken as prisoners. Only Jocelyn, with a handful of men, returned to Tiberias and reported what had happened to Baldwin II. Evidently annoyed by this new nomadic thorn in his side, the King of Jerusalem sent an entire army to confront the Bedouin threat. Realizing they had no chance with the full might of Jerusalem, the Muslim nomads panicked and opened talks with the Franks, promising the return of the prisoners in exchange for a peaceful duration in Transjordan until the end of summer 1119. This stabilized the Crusader state's southern frontier, but as this was happening, a conflict between the Principality of Antioch and the city of Aleppo was spiraling out of control. The death of Sultan Muhammad Tapar in 1118 sped up the fragmentation of the great Seljuk Empire, whose central authority had already been weakening for some time. When the Sultan died, he was succeeded by Mahmud II, but due to the new Sultan's young age,
it's always the same thing. Young age, power vacuum, someone steps in, civil war.
He could not wield any authority among his powerful governors. So it was that Mahmud's uncle Sanjar, ruler of Khorasan, seized control, turning the teenage Sultan into his puppet. Under Sanjar's administration, the Seljuk state mainly concerned itself with its territories in eastern Iran, which made the empire's western regions open to internal divisions. This negligence of the central authority of the Seljuks led to warlords in western Syria carving up their own domains in the region. Sultan Tapar's body was not yet cold when Toghtekin started a conflict with the powerful city of Aleppo, which was currently governed by a eunuch of Armenian origin named Yaruktash. Yaruktash, who had come to power via coup, was quick to look for allies outside his city. To that end, he made concessions to the Franks in Antioch by giving away a strategic fort and pilgrim station called Al-Quba. This infuriated the citizens of Aleppo, who rebelled against Yaruktash. In a final act of desperation, the eunuch pleaded for help from Najim ad-Din al-Ghazi of the Artuqid dynasty. Il-Ghazi was the Atabeg of the peripheral city of Mardin near the Tigris River, and was more than happy to take the opportunity to extend his influence over Aleppo. Expecting an easy prize, the Atabeg rushed to Aleppo, hoping that Yaruktash would open up the city gates for him. But as the Artuqid had reached the city walls, an unexpected surprise awaited him. Yaruktash had already been killed by an angry mob, which had subsequently barred the gates of the city in hopes of discouraging the warlord from Mardin. Il-Ghazi quickly realized that the plan had missed the boat, so he decided to send his son, Kizil, into the city as an ambassador. The the warlord of Mardin was well aware that in order to maintain balance in Syria, he had to make an alliance with Toghtekin, which as time would tell, proved to be the right choice. But bloody power shifts inside Aleppo were far from over. Sultan Shah ibn Redwan and his vizier Ibn al-Milhi, disgusted by Aleppo's dependence on Artuqid influence, decided to hand the city over to the Emir of Homs, Kirkan. What Ibn al-Milhi
Kirkan, now another player,
did not consider was that Ilghazi and Toghtekin had well-maintained relations. In a lightning campaign, they both quickly neutralized their opponents. Consequently, Ilghazi took Aleppo,
never mind,
while Toghtekin took Homs. Thereafter, Ilghazi became one of the most influential Atabegs in northern Syria, possessing the cities of Mardin.
Look how many cities Antioch rolls over. Like, this is gonna be a difficult task for the Muslims.
And Aleppo, and laying foundations for the Artuqid dynasty to expand their influence across northern Syria and Iraq. Now, with matters between his Muslim neighbors secured, he could finally focus his attention to the west. While the Muslims fought amongst themselves, the Crusaders smelled opportunity. This was especially true of Roger of Salerno. As an Antiochene regent for underage Bohemond II and a vassal of Baldwin le Boar of Jerusalem, Roger intended to tighten the principality's grip over the northern and eastern parts of Syria, and crushing the squabbling factions in Aleppo seemed to be the perfect opportunity to achieve this. Having already received the fortress of Al-Kaba from the late Yerukhtash, the Frankish leader pushed even further. In 1118, Roger combined his force with Jocelyn of Edessa and Armenian prince Tauros. Together they jointly captured the northern fortresses of Azaz and Bizar, thus threatening to
they basically surrounded them
around Aleppo from three sides.
Yeah.
Never in the history of the Outremer had the Crusaders come so close to capturing this city. The
Aleppo must be like a super stronghold then.
Latin offensive of Roger imposed a serious threat to Ilghazi's freshly acquired territories, which only made the confrontation with the Artuqids more inevitable. In response to the Latin encroachment, the Atabeg gathered his Turkoman horsemen, along with the Kurds and local Bedouin tribes under his command, and called his long-standing ally Toghtekin of Damascus and the Mungatites of Shaizar for aid.
Oh, so there's gonna be a battle.
Ilghazi used Toghtekin's previous demands for retreat of all Franks beyond the Jordan River as a pretext to invade the Principality of Antioch. At first, Ilghazi ordered his Mungatite allies to raid Antiochene territory as far as Apamia, while part of his Turkoman force blocked the road to Damascus near Samada. Meanwhile, the Artuqid himself raided the borderlands of Edessa to discourage local Latin nobles from helping Antioch, which worked, mainly due to Jocelyn's absence from the region.
Jocelyn just does things that makes him feel good.
Emboldened by his actions, Ilghazi moved with his 20,000 men to Kinasin near Aleppo to await for Toghtekin's reinforcements.
That's weird. It's weird that they're not able to like corner him. This must be some time has passed then.
However, Toghtekin was slow to arrive, and as time passed, Ilghazi began to grow increasingly angry at Damascus's emir's failure to show up at the scene. When news of the Artuqid incursion reached Roger of Salerno, he repeated his actions from his last campaign by gathering his troops near Antioch. But just as he had in 1115, he called for reinforcements from Jerusalem, Edessa and Tripoli. Yet, due to Baldwin's actions and Jocelyn's struggle with the Fatimids and the Bedouins in the south, it took a lot of time before they could muster an army to relieve Antioch. On the other side, Ilghazi was still waiting for Toghtekin and his troops to arrive. This quickly turned into a stalemate. Roger waited for Baldwin, Pons and Jocelyn, while Ilghazi waited for his Damascene ally. This uncertain deadlock was broken by the Antiochene nobles, who saw their fiefdoms being devastated by raids and started to pressure Roger of Salerno to take immediate action against Ilghazi.
Or his position will be threatened.
The only man who opposed this idea was the Patriarch of Antioch, Bernard of Valence. He advised caution and patience, urging the nobles to wait for the arrival of Baldwin II's army.
That's smart though.
Having been presented with a serious dilemma, Roger of Salerno ultimately chose to confront the Artuqid threat directly, without Jerusalem's assistance.
Okay.
He gathered the Principality's entire force, which consisted of 700 knights, 3,000 to 4,000 Latin infantry, and Armenians, Turcopoles, and other mercenaries.
Okay.
All told, the Antiochenes numbered anywhere between 7,000 to 11,000 men in total. The army also possessed a part of the Antiochene True Cross, which the regent of
Everyone's got a piece of the True Cross.
Antioch decided to use on the battlefield in order to boost the Latins' morale.
Okay.
With all the troops being assembled in Arta, Roger marched down to Samada, where he ambushed and routed a Turkoman detachment guarding the road. Confident in his position, he deployed his camp next to the hill, overseeing a road. But unlike his latest encounter at Samin, the Muslims were well informed about Roger's movement. Not only did El-Ghazi's scouts have a strong presence in the area, but they even managed to infiltrate the Crusaders' camp by dressing as local merchants, before providing El-Ghazi with a wealth of intel about the Frankish positions. When Antioch's army made camp, Roger of Salerno decided to strengthen the garrison at a local Atharib castle as well. The Crusader contingent deployed to this task was led by Robert of Villepont, who secured the fortress with ease. When the defenders saw an Artuqid detachment approaching the castle, the Latin commander decided to launch a foray beyond the walls. This move surprised the Turkoman horsemen, and having no time to make a feigned retreat, they were quickly routed.
So here comes the Ghazi.
So far, the Crusaders had won a number of small victories, but unbeknownst to them, the Atharib raid was merely a diversion in the south, while the main Muslim force was moving to the north through the mountain passes to surprise Antioch's army. Meanwhile, Frankish confidence was plummeting, mainly because of a loud incident before the battle. Following the skirmish near Atharib, a lunatic approached the Frankish camp during the night, simultaneously shouting and laughing out loud about the Crusaders' looming demise.
Yeah, that sounds like a lunatic.
Considering the fact that in the Middle Ages, superstitions still veiled a great influence over the knights and commoners, it definitely had to have an impact to some degree on the Latins' morale.
Yeah.
At the same time as the Antiochene troops had to spend a whole night with a madman, Il-Ghazi managed to surround the Antiochene camp from 3 sides. On the 28th of June 1119, as the Franks woke up, they saw a terrifying sight of Artuqid troops encircling their positions.
No Damascus help here, I guess.
The night maneuver of Il-Ghazi had shocked the Antiochene regent. The Latin camp was nothing more than a temporary stockade, which did not possess any water or food supply, making it ill-suited to withstand a siege.
Oof.
Initially, Roger sent scouts to look for a gap in Il-Ghazi's army, but as they searched for a potential weakness in the Artuqid line, they were driven back behind the palisade. Realizing the precariousness of his position, Roger hastily deployed his troops in line before the camp, bravely stating that he would like to go hunting. He ordered for a quick mass to be held, after which he divided his force into 4 groups. The right flank was composed of heavy knights commanded by Monk and Guy de Fromelles. Behind them was a second group of Latin horsemen led by Robert of Salerno. The left flank was composed of Turcopoles and lighter Armenian troops. Lastly, in the centre, Roger of Salerno led the Latin infantry and guarded the Holy Cross of Antioch. The prince hoped that his centre and Armenian left flank would hold out until the right flank of the knights could penetrate the Artuqid left, allowing...
This is crazy. They got cavalry center, infantry wide. Usually you would see the opposite.
The Antiochene army to break through enemy encirclement. On the other side, El-Ghazi first ordered his Turkoman horsemen to harass the Franks. Then he used his superior numbers to launch a direct charge of all his forces onto the enemy.
It does not look good for
After the initial exchange of bolts and arrows, it became all too clear that the Antiochenes' battle plan wouldn't last. The initial Antiochene charge from the right flank, led by de Fromelles' knights, had shell-shocked the Muslim troops at first, but it could not break the Artuqid left, and only temporarily managed to slow its advance.
Oh no.
The second charge, led by Robert of Salerno, faced the same issue, which resulted in lost momentum as the Latin knights gradually started to lose their ground. At the centre and the left flank, things didn't look any better for Roger. The Turkoman assault proved so effective that after a short bout of fighting, the Turcopoles and Armenians were overrun and fled to the centre, where they disrupted the formation of the Latin footmen.
It's over.
Around the same time, a strong wind named Kamsin arrived. It gathered up dry ground into a cloud of intense dust, and it blew directly in front of the Christians' faces. Their inability to see their opponents only added to the chaos and disorientation amongst the Latin ranks. It didn't
Thank
take
God.
long before the forces of Antioch were encircled from the left. Undeterred, Roger of Salerno still tried to press forward with his centre and right flank in order to escape a possible encirclement. Only a group of knights, led by Renal Mazois, managed to break through. Giving chase to the Artuqid horsemen, Renal managed to rush Ilghazi's force from behind, but because of the intense wounds he sustained during the battle, he was barely able to ride a horse. His retainers instead decided to escort him to the closest tower.
Yeah, they're just getting out of harm's way at this point. It's a rout.
Simultaneously, the Antioch army couldn't break through and found itself completely surrounded. The regent was brave and ferocious in combat, but eventually he was cut by a Saracen blade that pierced through his nose and brain, thus ending his life. The sudden death of Roger had paved the way for the Muslims to seize the Golden Cross of Antioch, the main standard of the Latin army. Despite the ferocity of its remaining Christian defenders, the relic fell into the hands of the attackers shortly afterwards. At this point, medieval chroniclers depict over-exaggerated accounts, in which the Muslims were stricken by greed and malice in the presence of the cross, and supposedly started to kill each other over the distribution of the spoils. This is probably apocryphal.
Yep.
In any case, the fall of the main insignia panicked the Crusaders, who began to flee wherever they could, but to no avail. Almost all the Antiochene knights were killed that day, while only a few Franks managed to survive the battle and retreat to the Belus Hills to the west and Samada. The Crusaders' casualties were so severe that the location of the battle was given its terrifying name, Ager Sanguinis, the Field of Blood.
Field of Blood. True.
The name of the struggle also extended outside the battlefield. The victorious Ilghazi ordered that every Antiochene survivor was to be pursued and hunted down. Every Frankish knight or servant was slaughtered by Ilghazi in local vineyards. Ilghazi himself chased the remaining Latin force of Renal Mazois, who had fled and barricaded himself inside the fortress of Samada. Renal, being well aware that he was heavily wounded and his men could not withstand a siege, began talks with the Artuqid chief. During these talks, Ilghazi was firmly impressed by Mazois' courage, and so allowed him to surrender and return to inform Antioch about his defeat. The same could not be said about the rest of his companions, who were massacred by Ilghazi's men on the spot. In the end, only around 70 Latin knights were taken captive. Being dragged by Ilghazi all the way to Aleppo, they became a major part of his victorious procession throughout the city.
Like a triumph.
As the grand celebrations were over, all Frankish prisoners were executed by its inhabitants.
Like a triumph.
Thanks to his victorious endeavour, Ilghazi's authority and prestige spread across the Muslim world. For his triumph, the Artuqid leader was rewarded by the Caliph himself, who titled the Atabeg as a Star of Religion, in other words, a spiritual guide of Sunni Islam. Despite having achieved a total victory, Ilghazi didn't press his army to attack Antioch. Many historians criticized him for this decision. However, it is very important to consider that Ilghazi likely did not have enough supply and siege equipment to lay a proper siege or break through the strong walls of Antioch. He couldn't be certain whether Jerusalem and Tripoli would approach him on Antiochene territory with another Christian army. For the moment, Ilghazi's main objective had been achieved. The city of Aleppo was saved from an encirclement. So Antioch was safe from the Artuqids for the time being. Antioch's confrontation with Ilghazi at Ager Sanguinis ended up as a disaster for the Latins in Syria. Its renowned leader, Roger of Salerno, was dead, and almost every experienced knight who served with Bohemond and Tancred was killed. Moreover, the Antiochene part of the Holy Cross was lost to the Saracens, the Principality of Antioch was defenseless, and the Latin presence in Syria was in jeopardy. Would that be the end of Antioch, or would the city survive the Artuqid tide? In the next episode of our...
That's crazy. That's the end of that. I'm wondering if that true cross, was there any validity to that? If you guys do know, let me know. But now Antioch has like a power vacuum itself, you know. I'm sure that there's a succession line. Now, I think Roger was holding the place for a younger person, almost like a queen regent, but not like a queen regent situation. So now there's that power vacuum that's going to need to be filled in not Aleppo, but Antioch. And yeah, this is the quote unquote the beginning of the Second Crusade, I'm guessing. So we'll have to see what happens next. Oh, we're gonna, go through these kings and generals videos and really understand the what transpires from the First Crusade up until, I don't know, maybe we go as far as the Ottoman Empire. We'll see what you guys think to that. Until next time, though, peace out. Have a great one. Goodbye.